My dear students, welcome back to our channel. In this video, I will be explaining the MCA second semester subject Machine Learning as prescribed by Osmania University and other universities of Telangana. We will go through the important questions and answers one by one. Let's begin with a quick revision. Unit 3 first important short question is Linear Classification. Linear classification is a method in machine learning where we separate data into different classes using a straight line, 2D, plane, 3D, or a hyperplane, higher dimensions. It works well when data is linearly separable, meaning one class can be divided from another with a straight boundary. The model finds a decision boundary based on feature values. If a data point falls on one side of the line, it belongs to one class. If it's on the other side, it belongs to another. Example. Imagine classifying emails as spam or not spam using two features. Number of suspicious words. Number of links in the email. A straight line can separate spam, high words and links from non-spam emails. Common algorithms. Logistic regression. Linear support vector machine (SVM). Easy tip, think of linear classification as drawing a straight chalk line on the ground to separate two groups of students standing in a playground. Next important short question is 2. What is the perceptron algorithm? Perceptron algorithm. The perceptron algorithm is one of the simplest machine learning algorithms used for binary classification, classifying data into two groups. It works like a small brain cell, neuron, that takes inputs, assigns weights, and makes decisions. It calculates a weighted sum of inputs and passes it through a step function. If the output is above a threshold, it predicts class 1. Otherwise, it predicts class 0. The algorithm keeps adjusting weights based on errors until it can separate the data correctly. Example. Imagine classifying fruits as apple or orange using features like weight and color intensity. The perceptron will draw a line, boundary, between apples and oranges after training. Easy tip. Think of it as a simple decision maker that learns step by step, like a student adjusting answers after every test until they get it right. Next important short question is 3. Write a short note on decision trees. Decision trees. A decision tree is a popular machine learning algorithm used for classification and regression. It works like a flowchart, where each node represents a question or decision based on a feature, and each branch shows the possible answers. The tree continues splitting until it reaches a leaf node, which gives the final prediction. Example. To decide should I go out to play, the tree may ask 1. Is it sunny? Yes. Is it hot? Yes. Stay home. No. Go play. No. Stay home. This step-by-step questioning makes decisions easy to follow. Why it's useful? Simple to understand and visualize. Works well for both numbers and text data. Often used in business, medicine, and weather prediction. Think of it as a game of 20 questions, where each answer narrows down to the correct decision. Next important short question is 4. Define naive Bayes classifier. Naive Bayes classifier. The naive Bayes classifier is a simple machine learning algorithm based on Bayes' theorem. It assumes that all features, inputs, are independent of each other, which is why it's called naive. Despite this assumption, it works surprisingly well in practice. It calculates the probability of each class for given data and chooses the class with the highest probability. Example. If we want to predict if an email is spam or not spam, Naive Bayes looks at words like free, offer, or win, calculates probabilities, and then predicts the most likely category. Why it's useful? Very fast and works well even with a small dataset. Great for text classification, like spam filtering, sentiment analysis, and medical diagnosis. Think of it as a probability-based guesser that uses math to pick the most likely answer. Next. Unit 3. Top 5 long questions. First important long question is 1. Explain logistic regression in detail with mathematical formulation and an example. Logistic regression. Logistic regression is a classification algorithm used in machine learning to predict categorical outcomes like yes, no, pass, fail, spam, not spam. Unlike linear regression, which predicts continuous values, logistic regression predicts the probability of a class using a special function called the sigmoid function. Key idea. We use a line or plane to separate classes, but instead of predicting values directly, we predict probabilities between 0 and 1. Probability close to 1 positive class, example, spam. Probability close to 0 negative class, example, not spam. Mathematical formulation. 1. Linear combination of inputs. Z is equal to W0 plus W1x1 plus W2x2 plus Wnxn. 2. Sigmoid function to convert Z into probability. P, y is equal to 1x, is equal to sigma, Z, is equal to 1 plus Ez. 3. Decision rule. If P, y is equal to 1 vertical bar x, 0.5, predict 1, positive. Else, predict 0, negative. Example. Suppose we want to predict if a student passes an exam based on hours of study. Input, hours studied, kiss smiley. Logistic regression learns weights to calculate probability. If probability is equal to 0.85 predict pass, if 0.3 predict fail. Why it's important? Works well for binary classification problems. Can be extended to multiclass problems, softmax regression. Easy to implement and interpret. Tip to remember. Logistic regression is not about drawing a straight line but about using the S-curve, sigmoid, to separate classes and predict probabilities. Next important long question is 2. Discuss the architecture and working of artificial neural networks and with backpropagation. Artificial neural networks and with backpropagation. An artificial neural network and is a machine learning model inspired by the human brain. It is made up of neurons, nodes, arranged in layers that work together to recognize patterns, classify data, and make predictions. And is widely used in tasks like image recognition, speech processing, and stock prediction. Architecture of an 1. Input layer. Takes input features like age, marks, temperature. Each neuron represents a feature. 2. Hidden layers. Perform calculations using weights and biases. The more hidden layers, the more complex the network. 3. Output layer. Gives the final result, like yes, no, or class labels. Connections between layers have weights, which are learned during training. Working process. 1. Forward propagation. Inputs are passed layer by layer. Each neuron applies a mathematical function. Z is equal to V11 plus B. An activation function, like sigmoid, ReLU, decides neuron output. 2. Error calculation. Compare output with actual result using a loss function, like mean squared error. 3. Backpropagation. Adjust weights to reduce error. Uses gradient descent to find the best weights. Errors are sent backward through the network layer by layer. 4. Training loop. Repeat forward pass and backpropagation until the model learns well. Example. Predicting if an email is spam or not spam. Inputs words in the email and processes these through hidden layers. Output probability, example, 0.9 spam. Why it's important? Can learn complex patterns. Backpropagation helps it improve automatically. Used in AI applications like self-driving cars, chatbots, and recommendation systems. Tip to remember. ANS work like a student. Forward pass is equal to write test. Backpropagation is equal to learn from mistakes, adjust and improve. Next important long question is 3. Explain support vector machines, SVM, and the role of kernels in classification. Support vector machines, SVM, and kernels in classification. Support vector machine, SVM, is a popular machine learning algorithm used for classification and regression tasks. Its main goal is to find the best boundary, hyperplane, that separates data points of different classes. How SVM works? 1. SVM looks for a line in 2D or a plane in 3D called a hyperplane that divides data into categories. 2. It chooses the best hyperplane that has the largest margin, meaning the maximum distance between the hyperplane and the nearest data points of each class. 3. The data points closest to this boundary are called support vectors because they support or define the hyperplane. Example. Imagine classifying emails as spam or not spam. Each email is plotted based on features like word frequency, sender details. SVM finds the perfect boundary that separates spam emails from non-spam ones. Role of kernels. Sometimes data is not linearly separable. You can't draw a straight line to separate classes. Here, kernels help. A kernel function transforms data into a higher dimension where a straight boundary can separate classes. Think of it like lifting points into 3D space to draw a plane, then projecting back to 2D. Common kernels. Linear kernel for linearly separable data. Polynomial kernel for complex curved boundaries. RBF, radial basis function, kernel, very popular, draws smooth boundaries. Advantages. Works well even with small datasets. Effective for high-dimensional data like text, images. Flexible with kernel tricks. Quick analogy. SVM is like a fence between two gardens. The support vectors are plants closest to the fence. The kernel is a tool that lets you build curved fences when a straight one won't work. Tip to remember. SVM is equal to find the widest boundary. Kernels is equal to magic trick to separate tough data. Next important long question is 4. Compare linear discriminant analysis, LDA, and quadratic discriminant analysis, QDA, with applications. LDA versus QDA, a simple comparison. Linear discriminant analysis, LDA, and quadratic discriminant analysis, QDA, are two popular classification algorithms in machine learning based on Bayes' theorem. Both aim to find boundaries that separate classes, but their assumptions and decision boundaries are different. Linear discriminant analysis, LDA. Assumption: all classes share the same covariance matrix, similar spread shape of data. Decision boundary, linear, a straight line, or plane in higher dimensions, separates classes. Working. 1. LDA models each class as a Gaussian, bell-shaped distribution. 2. It estimates a common covariance for all classes. 3. It calculates probabilities for each class and classifies based on the highest probability. when to use, best when data is roughly linear and classes have similar variances. Example: classifying students into pass or fail based on marks in math and science if both groups have similar score spreads. Quadratic discriminant analysis, QDA. Assumption: each class has its own covariance matrix, different spread shape. Decision boundary, quadratic curves are used to separate classes. Working. 1. QDA models each class as a Gaussian distribution but does not assume equal variance. 2. This flexibility allows more complex boundaries. When to use, best when data is nonlinear and variances differ between classes. Example: classifying types of flowers based on petal width and length when different flower types have different spreads. Comparison table. Feature LDA QDA. Covariance same for all classes, different for each class. Boundary linear curved quadratic. Complexity simpler, less data needed, more flexible, more data needed. Best for linear data, nonlinear data. Applications: LDA, face recognition, medical diagnosis, document classification. QDA, gene expression classification, image recognition, complex datasets. Tip to remember: LDA is equal to linear boundaries, simpler, equal spreads. QDA is equal to quadratic boundaries, flexible, unequal spreads. Next important long question is: 5. Discuss the Bayes optimal classifier and its importance in classification problems. Blue Book Bayes optimal classifier, BOC, and its importance. The Bayes optimal classifier is a theoretical classification model that gives the best possible predictions for a given problem. It uses the full probability distribution of the data and applies Bayes' theorem to choose the class with the highest probability. How it works: 1. For each data point, the classifier calculates the posterior probability of belonging to each class. P class data is equal to P data class, P class, P data. 2. It assigns the data point to the class with the highest posterior probability. 3. This minimizes the probability of error, making it the most accurate classifier. Simple example: imagine predicting if a student will pass or fail based on study hours and attendance. If we know the exact probability distribution, example, students studying 5 hours have a 90% pass chance. The Bayes optimal classifier will always choose the class with the highest probability. For a student with 6 hours of study and 90% attendance, it might predict pass with high confidence. Importance in ML. Gold standard, it sets a benchmark for all other classifiers. No model can perform better than the Bayes optimal classifier. Error minimization guarantees the lowest possible error rate for classification tasks. Guides algorithm design, helps researchers design practical algorithms like naive Bayes, SVM, neural networks that approximate this optimal performance. Challenges. In real life, we don't know the true data distribution. Estimating exact probabilities is difficult, especially for large or high-dimensional datasets. Quick summary table. Feature Bayes optimal classifier. Basis full probability model. Error rate minimum possible. Practicality hard to implement. Usage theoretical benchmark. Memory tip. Think of BOC as the perfect teacher who knows the entire question paper beforehand and always gives the correct answer. Other classifiers try to be as close as possible to this perfect teacher.